They said, all you need is love. And so she set off to find it. She searched balconies and mezzanines, under arches and willow trees. She stood in meadows and ran through pastures. She was rapt and enraptured. She looked over the rainbow and around the bend. At every turn, another dead end. So she went to the ball, dressed in a gown, wearing glass slippers and a crystal crown. On a horse-drawn carriage, she rode through town, offered up her best smile, and they said, tone that down. She looked for electric love and quiet love and wish upon a star love, for her one true love, her you complete me love, and her happily ever after love. And she found moths and flames and waiting games, and folks falling head over heels into having the hots and tying knots. They were crushing, yearning, longing, simping, pining, and taking the plunge, and she thought, oh, I'm not meant for such extreme sport. And they said, don't worry, you just have to find the one, just one to join your lives forever together, combined and twined. And she wondered, is there another kind of love to find? Spoiler alert, there is another kind of love to be found. But before I get to that, I'd like to tell you about the first time I fell in love. I met Alex at a friend's recommendation, and it wasn't love at first sight, but Alex was charming and incredibly kind. They were smart, they challenged me and opened me up to new ideas. When I was with Alex, all the cliches made sense. I felt incredibly alive and undeniably seen. I felt like anything was possible. But away from Alex, I was still miserable, still suicidal. And now, because I couldn't stop thinking about Alex, I was deeply, deeply ashamed. Because Alex was my therapist. How did it feel hearing I fell in love with my therapist? I imagine at least some of you thought that was a bit weird. And before I knew better, I thought there was something wrong with my feelings for Alex, so I found a new therapist. With that new therapist, and as a new therapist, I began to study the therapeutic relationship from both sides of the couch. And this helped me to expand my definition of love to include platonic intimacy, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. When you hear the words love and intimacy, what do you think about? Who do you think about? What stories and experiences come to mind? If you mostly imagine the stuff of rom-coms, you're not the only one. And if being a therapist has taught me anything, it's that you're never the only one. And for me, this was confirmed when I read hundreds of posts on Reddit about folks falling in love with their therapist. So I grew curious. What was it about the therapeutic relationship that, when measured against our dominant narrative on love, looked like romance? Here's how I came to understand it. As humans, we have an inherent need to be seen, understood, and accepted as we are, which hopefully is what happens in therapy. But as a society, we have romanticized the heck out of this. Hollywood love stories have taught us to associate being seen and accepted with romance. And they've taught us that romantic love is the best love and that it's kind of a one-size-fits-all love. So thanks to Disney, we're all out there looking for the same thing. Most of us have also internalized society's relational hierarchy. That is, when it comes to relationships, we place romantic love at the top of the pyramid. So it makes sense that at the first sign of intimacy, of being seen or cared for by another, our brains eagerly jump to the conclusion of romance. We've been told our whole lives that romance is the caviar of love. And humans need love like we need food. But our current model of love, with its emphasis on romance, It's a little bit like going to a buffet and ordering a la carte. It's not wrong or bad, but it's limiting. As a therapist, I've seen the negative impact these limits have on hearts. The message received is that without these idealized love stories, you're not enough. But our view of love is so limited that most popular love stories end when you find the one. I don't know about you, but that seems to me like it's just a prologue. Now, I want to be really clear. I'm not poo-pooing romantic love. I'm a big fan. I just think there's room to expand our definition and widen the lens through which we view love so we can feel more love. If I ask you to bring to mind all the relationships in your life, is there only love in the romantic ones? And if I ask you to think about your most embarrassing moments, are your sexual and romantic partners privy to the same intimate details that your friends and therapists are? So isn't it curious that these ideas of platonic love and intimacy are so underrepresented in our culture? The shame I felt about being in love with my therapist was directly connected to society's narrow perspectives around what constitutes love and intimacy, not to mention the deficits in language and representation of platonic love. Love. We have this one four-letter word, and it mostly calls to mind sugary fairy tales. So, friendships and other loving relationships have become the unsung heroes of connection. I want to tell you another story. This one is about heartbreak, but don't worry, there's a happy ending. When Sam and I first met, we were polar opposites that did not attract. But the universe kept bringing us together, and eventually things shifted. Over the next 10 years, I nurtured a wild and infinite love for Sam and their then 3-year-old daughter, Bella. And just after celebrating 11 years together, we welcomed baby Cruz into our lives. And this little boy, he took up the largest corner of my heart. But just shy of our 15th year together, Sam and I had a huge falling out, and we broke up. I was devastated. I lost 3 loves that day, and I went from seeing Sam and their kids most days to not at all. And if you're wondering why didn't we share custody after the breakup, it's because Sam wasn't a romantic partner. They were a platonic friend. And I wonder, does that detail change how you perceive our story? Now, that happy ending I promised, 4 years later, Sam and I reconciled. They and their kids are very much a part of my life today. But at the time of our breakup, my grief was not only immense, it was complicated. Those kids were just gone from my life. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. And I didn't feel fully valid or justified in grieving the loss, in part because our society ignores, or at best undervalues, the roles and connections that exist outside of romantic partnerships. We turn to friends and other platonic connections in times of stress, but we don't value or celebrate these relationships the way we do romantic ones. Why not? Have you ever stopped to think about that? Where in our culture do we make space for the experiences of single people? Being single is a natural human occurrence, and it's a valid choice. But we continue to perpetuate the idea that it's somehow a sign of failure. When I was preparing to write this talk, I reached out to the single people I know and I asked them, what's the hardest thing for you about being single? And do you know what every single one of them told me? It's not being single that's hard. It's the way the world makes you feel about it. Our society frames romantic love as the only true love. Holidays celebrate it, institutions codify it, and our social customs cement its status as a hallmark of success. We treat single people like they don't count, and it's not even our fault. What do you remember about the stories of love from your childhood? At what age did it become clear to you that the pursuit of romantic love should be a focal point in your adulthood? I was 8 years old the first time someone asked me who I wanted to marry. Like many Gen Xers, by the time I was in the 6th grade, I was devouring books by Danielle Steele and watching all the soap operas. And don't even get me started on the impact of shows like Dawson's Creek, One Tree Hill, 90210. I didn't know at the time those shows were glorifying codependence, but I did know that they made me feel like a loser in my so-called life. Pop culture teaches us that romantic love is a measure of worth and social status, and that a romantic partnership can be the answer to many of life's struggles. We've all been raised on stories of love to the rescue. And once upon a time, I believed what the movies and books were telling me. But the longer I worked as a therapist, the less things were adding up. I'd sit across from people who'd tell me they'd never been in a long-term relationship, and initially I believed them. It didn't occur to me to ask about platonic relationships. I still had my Disney subscription. But with time and maturity and canceling that subscription, what began to stand out was this undeniable discord between what we're led to believe about being partnered and in love and what was coming through the door to my therapy office. Partnered people weren't happier. They didn't feel more loved or more successful. They had just as much struggle as their single counterparts. Being a therapist taught me that unlike the fairy tale love we're raised on, real love doesn't come to the rescue of anyone. And that freed me to rescue my own damn self. It empowered me to show up and love more deeply in all of my relationships. So these days, I feel incredibly grateful for all the ways that my work and my clients have taught me that love is abundant and helped me let go of my beliefs around the scarcity and the sanctity of romantic love. When you make romantic love the only focus of your time and attention, and you uphold its status as the most valuable social currency, it undermines all loving relationships. It creates impossible expectations for the romantic ones and devalues the platonic ones. But if you define love in a way that includes and values platonic intimacy, you can feel empowered to cultivate it in your life instead of waiting for it to find you. And on the surface, that might seem like settling, but what lies beneath, at least in my experience, is freedom and abundance. Sure, there's less room for the drama and excitement that comes with our current model of love, but isn't it time for an upgrade? So what does that look like in practice? How can you cultivate more love in your life? And what can you do to help decrease the stigma around being single? Well, for starters, stop asking your single friends why they're single. Understand that platonic love is real love, and romantic love is not inherently more valuable. Resist the fairy tale package. Love in a way that makes sense for you, your life, and your people. Include your single friends without making them bring a +1. Celebrate all the love in your life. It's not about romantic versus platonic. There's room for both. Represent. Create art, make music, write stories about the platonic love in your life. And finally, let go of the idea that love is scarce or that loving more people means loving your person less. I dare you to let go of the limiting beliefs that romantic love is better or more fulfilling than platonic love, and watch what happens. I know the love I feel for the people in my life is immeasurable and incomparable. I don't love them all equally, but I also don't love them in preferential order. I just love them abundantly. Love. It's one word, but love is not singular, it's kaleidoscopic. When you look to atypical sites of connection and recognize that intimacy comes in many shapes, colors, and sizes, there's a ripple effect. You feel more loved. They feel more loved, and theirs feel more loved. When you replace the hierarchy with a kaleidoscope view, one that includes all kinds of relationships, love abounds and blooms everywhere. They said, all you need is love. And she said, cool, I'm all set.